It is a moment that has stunned Washington and much of the world. Inside the Oval Office, US President Donald Trump stands beside a man once considered one of the Middle East's most feared insurgents, Ahmed al-Sharaa, the new president of Syria. The two leaders, standing shoulder to shoulder beneath the familiar gold curtains, mark a turning point in modern diplomacy. For the first time since 1946, a Syrian head of state has entered the White House, and the symbolism could hardly be greater. As cameras flash, Trump greets his guest with his trademark confidence, calling the meeting historic and the beginning of something very big for Syria. Journalists, surprised by the ease of their interaction, capture every movement, every remark. Reporters note how Sharaa, once branded a jihadist commander during the darkest years of Syria's civil war, now walks through the corridors of American power as a president seeking legitimacy, reconstruction aid, and a promise of peace. Trump begins his remarks with a tone of both admiration and realism. He tells the gathered press, "You can expect some announcements on Syria." We want to see Syria become a country that's very successful, and I think this leader can do it. I really do. I think this leader can do it. And people said he's had a rough past. We've all had rough pasts, but he has had a rough past. And I think, frankly, if you didn't have a rough past, you wouldn't have a chance. His words, both disarming and provocative, send a ripple through the room. The US president is publicly endorsing a man whose biography once symbolized Washington's greatest fears in the region. The statement is not just about Syria, it is about Trump's worldview, the belief that strength and survival create capable partners. In the president's mind, Sharaa's violent origins are not a liability, but proof of resilience. It is a message tailored to audiences in the Middle East who see toughness as a prerequisite for leadership, and to Americans who have grown accustomed to Trump's unapologetic style. Across the Atlantic, reactions are swift. In European capitals, diplomats call the scene unthinkable only a few years earlier. In Damascus, crowds gather in public squares to watch live coverage on state television, waving Syrian flags and chanting slogans about a new chapter. In the Arab world, social media erupts with debate. Some call Sharaa's visit a victory for Syria's sovereignty. Others call it a betrayal of justice for the victims of war. Back inside the Oval Office, Trump turns to domestic policy, shifting from geopolitics to economics, a hallmark of his leadership style. He reminds the press that America's economic strength is the foundation of its global power. Without tariffs, this country would be in such trouble as they were for many years, he says. That's why we owe $38 trillion. And one of the things we're going to issue a dividend to our middle-income people and lower-income people of about $2,000, and we're going to use the remaining tariffs to lower our debt. We're going to be lowering our debt, which is a national security thing. The president's tone is confident. The message is clear. Tariffs are not just economic tools, but weapons of national defense. Linking his tariff policy to America's security and him, Trump argues that financial discipline is essential to sustain the country's global influence, especially at a time when Washington is re-engaging with volatile regions like the Middle East. As reporters continue to fire questions, Trump pivots toward India, signaling a subtle recalibration of America's trade relationships in Asia. Right now, the tariffs are very high on India because of the Russian oil, he explains, and they've stopped doing the Russian oil. It's been reduced very substantially. Yeah, we're going to be bringing the tariffs down on India. The remark, brief but pointed, hints at a broader shift, rewarding New Delhi for distancing itself from Moscow's energy exports, while reinforcing the US-India partnership that has grown central to Washington's Indo-Pacific strategy. Trump then fields another question about Switzerland, a small but symbolically important ally. We're working on a deal to get their tariffs a little bit lower, he says, brushing off a reporter's suggestion of a 15% figure. No, I haven't said any number, but we're going to be working on something to help Switzerland along. We hit Switzerland very hard. We want Switzerland to remain successful. And we're a part of Switzerland in the sense that they've been a very good ally. The answer underscores Trump's transactional approach. Even with close allies, economic balance comes first, but friendship must still be preserved. The president's comments flow effortlessly between topics: Syria, tariffs, trade partners, all stitched together by the theme of toughness and reward. For Trump, global politics is a marketplace where loyalty, resilience, and pragmatism count more than ideology. Then comes another reveal. So we are now in the process. We're in final bids of getting the finest system anywhere in the world, Trump says with visible enthusiasm. I've analysed it. Sean Duffy has been working really hard on it, doing a fantastic job, by the way. And over the next 2 or 3 weeks, we'll be handing out the finest air traffic control system anywhere in the world. All the towers will be equipped. It's an announcement that merges domestic modernization with global ambition, part of a larger effort to showcase America as technologically unmatched. But behind the day's optimism lies a far deeper story. Ahmed al-Sharaa's presence at the White House marks a radical departure from decades of American policy that sought to isolate or sanction Syria. Once a militant commander accused of leading jihadist battalions in the early years of the Syrian conflict, Sharaa reinvented himself through a political amnesty and a nationwide reconciliation process. His rise to the presidency after the collapse of the Assad regime was initially dismissed as impossible. Yet by 2025, with Russian influence waning and Iran's networks weakened, Washington began to view Sharaa as the only leader capable of stabilizing a fractured state. In Trump's eyes, this is not appeasement, it is realpolitik, the recognition that power in the Middle East often comes from unlikely sources. He's tough, Trump reportedly told advisors before the meeting. He knows how to fight, and now he wants to build. That phrase, repeated by aides to journalists later in the day, becomes the defining summary of Trump's gamble, turning a one-time enemy into a partner of convenience. Diplomatic observers recall that the path to this moment began months earlier, when quiet back-channel talks between US and Syrian intermediaries were facilitated through the United Arab Emirates. The Emirati foreign minister, along with Egyptian and Saudi envoys, served as guarantors for Sharaa's commitment to distance his government from extremist factions and to cut remaining ties with Iranian-backed militias. In return, Washington agreed to lift select sanctions on Syria's energy and reconstruction sectors, enabling foreign investment to rebuild infrastructure devastated by more than a decade of war. For Trump, this alignment fits perfectly with his broader Middle East strategy, a coalition of transactional relationships anchored on national interests, not moral judgments. His aides describe the White House approach as a continuation of the Abraham Accords logic: reward stability regardless of the past. Critics, however, see it differently. Human rights groups warn that legitimizing a former jihadist risks undermining accountability and whitewashing atrocities. European governments express concern that the US move could fragment Western unity over Syria policy. Yet Trump appears unfazed, dismissing critics as people who talk but never build. Throughout the day, American networks broadcast footage of the two leaders exchanging remarks in front of the cameras. Sharaa, dressed in a dark suit, avoids ideological language and instead focuses on reconstruction and sovereignty. His brief comments, though not included in the official transcript, emphasize a desire for friendship, investment, and the rebuilding of a proud nation. The tone of the coverage is striking. For decades, Syrian leaders were synonymous with isolation, war crimes, and dictatorship. Now, under Trump's watch, a man once described as an enemy of the West is treated as a potential partner in peace. The shift is so dramatic that even seasoned correspondents struggle to contextualize it. One senior analyst tells AFP that this is not normalization, it's a total reinvention of US-Syria relations under Trump too. The meeting also coincides with broader changes in global alignment. Russia's attention is consumed by its ongoing confrontation with NATO in Eastern Europe, and Moscow's traditional grip on Damascus has weakened. Iran, facing domestic unrest and sanctions pressure, has scaled back funding to proxy networks in Syria. Into this vacuum steps Sharaa, a figure both feared and admired, now seeking to position himself as a nationalist leader who can restore order without foreign domination. Trump, ever the showman, sees the opportunity to project leadership at minimal cost. No new troops, no new war, just a handshake and a promise of investment. We're not nation building, he emphasizes privately, according to officials briefed on the talks. We're deal making. That philosophy, distilled into one phrase, defines his foreign policy doctrine: alliances built through leverage, not lectures. As the day unfolds, coverage of Trump's other remarks about tariffs, trade and the economy reinforces his image as both negotiator and nationalist. Analysts note that the president's economic and foreign policy messages are inseparable. America's fiscal discipline fuels its global influence. Economic sovereignty ensures strategic autonomy. Even his references to India and Switzerland are framed as examples of reciprocal respect, nations rewarded for cooperation and fairness. Yet the true headline remains Syria. Behind the scenes, officials confirm that Washington and Damascus have agreed to establish a limited diplomatic liaison office, the first step toward restoring full relations. Humanitarian organizations, meanwhile, anticipate that the move will accelerate aid delivery and unlock frozen reconstruction funds. For millions of Syrians displaced by conflict, the White House visit signals a fragile but hopeful opening. In the evening, as the sun sets over Washington, Trump and al-Sharaa share a private dinner hosted by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and National Security Advisor Sean Duffy. The conversation reportedly focuses on rebuilding Syria's energy sector, reintegrating former fighters, and reopening trade routes through Jordan and Iraq. al-Sharaa requests US technical assistance to modernize Syria's power grid, and Trump agrees to send an exploratory delegation within weeks. The symbolism of the dinner is impossible to miss. A former enemy of the United States breaking bread with its leadership in the heart of American power. For Trump, it is proof that diplomacy through strength works. For al-Sharaa, it is a victory of survival, an acknowledgement that his transformation from militant to head of state is now recognized on the world stage. By nightfall, news outlets across the Middle East replay the same line from Trump's remarks: "I think this leader can do it." In Damascus, the quote becomes a slogan splashed across state media banners. In Washington, it becomes the subject of debate panels and op-eds, dividing pundits between those who see a masterstroke of diplomacy and those who see dangerous naivety. But Trump, true to form, appears undeterred by controversy. His administration begins drafting a new framework for Middle East stabilization, a plan that integrates economic corridors, security partnerships, and counter-terrorism coordination under the leadership of regional players, not American troops. In this architecture, Syria, once a pariah, now occupies a seat at the table. Over the following days, the ripple effects of the meeting spread. Oil prices briefly dip amid expectations of greater regional stability. The Syrian pound strengthens modestly. Gulf investors begin exploratory talks about infrastructure projects in Aleppo and Homs. Washington insiders speak of a potential trilateral summit that could include Egypt and Jordan. The diplomatic machinery, once frozen, begins to turn again. Through it all, Trump's narrative remains consistent. Strength earns respect, and respect produces results. His repeated references to rough paths are more than rhetorical. They are the foundation of his worldview. In his eyes, nations, like people, are redeemed through resilience. Whether history will validate that philosophy remains to be seen. As the cameras are packed away and the crowds disperse, the Oval Office returns to its familiar calm. The meeting with Syria's new leader has ended, but its echoes are only beginning for the United States. It marks a new experiment in diplomacy, one that blends realism, symbolism, and spectacle in equal measure. For Ahmed al-Sharaa, it marks the culmination of an improbable journey from the battlefield to the world's most powerful office. And for President Donald Trump, it is another moment of calculated disruption, a declaration that in his America, the past is negotiable and the future belongs to those bold enough to rewrite it.